Have you ever wondered what it takes to work in the space sector? Our guest today holds the unique title of Existential Detective. That got my attention. He operates at the intersection of imagination and reality, searching for the why behind the machine. Josh believes that whether it's a custom car, a fighter jet, or a next generation spacecraft, the difference between a concept and a reality comes down to the mastery of matter and mission. He is here to talk about how that unique blend of hands on grit and visionary design helps him turn futuristic dreams into reality. Please welcome Josh Hundley.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Josh, tell us in your own words what you do.
So basically, I bring vehicles into reality. So people have these ideas, whether it's a car or a plane or a spacecraft, and they think to themselves, they want it enough that that they decide to bring it to life. And whether it's for fun or it's for it's for a mission or it's just for moving stuff around the planet. It finally gets to the point they need to make it. I mean, we've been in space for 70 years. The expectations of the people around us and the people buying it are a lot higher than a lot of people think. And so a lot of what I do fills in the gaps of making it work, but also making it safe.
What's the coolest skill you learned that you never thought would matter, but it absolutely does?
Honestly, I have been amazed. I started off life actually in musical theater as a child. I was one of those singing stars. And I actually in college I was the set designer. Then I met my wife, and so acting has had like a big influence on what I've been doing. Acting teaches you how to present yourself and recognize that the audience is there, and teaches you that like you are there to tell a story to someone else. And so I've really enjoyed I'm always surprised at how acting comes in, even in the professional world where if you run a larger organization, you are playing a role bigger than yourself. And so you are more about, getting people to go move in a direction and, to kind of think towards a common goal. Being able to separate and create that character that is somewhat larger than life has been pretty beneficial.
Perfect skill. That's a
Excellent.
great description right there. Imagine you're at an event and you hand a business card to someone, and they take your card and they look at you and say, give me 3 words that you use to describe yourself so that when I pick up this business card, I'll remember exactly who you are. What 3 words would you use to describe yourself?
In general, I am resourceful. I am emotionally in tuned, and I can see problems from multiple sides.
Well, I like that. And that's where that engineer brain of yours really comes into play, is being able to see things from all sides.
I grew up with scientific parents. My mom's a college professor at Auburn. My dad was a chief engineer for the Army. I didn't realize this, but both of those are just very big data kind of jobs and being able to handle big data in the physical sense, but also just being handle big data in the fact of just having a large group of people. Definitely, that's why I drove me to engineering was the kind of the conflicts of the two things, big data and just big effort.
What is a skill that you learned accidentally?
For me, I accidentally learned to master metal. I came from a family of builders and I grew up in construction sites. My family built everything. They built army bases, they built fish farms, they built pizzerias. But I was a kid, so all I did was just move stuff around. And I didn't like it. And so, I was just taking things from A to B. And I never really stopped to think of what I was like hauling. I just knew it was heavy. And so it was just this kind of cold hearted thing. And so I did actually learn the accidental lesson was that when I actually started working with it, as soon as I started to like weld it and bend it and fabricate it, I realized that it wasn't like the final part wasn't the thing. It was this material I was working with. And honestly, it was kind of amazing. It basically turned into, I realized that metal is this kind of very strong clay. And with the right amount of heat and the right amount of, and the force in the right direction, you can make it do anything. You can even make it flow like water. And once it cools back down, it's still rigid enough to break the speed of sound. And so that's always fascinated me is how you take, I mean, literally, sand and you can turn it into a fighter jet.
What helped you more? Learning how to talk, listen, or recover after messing up?
So for me, it's always been listening. I engineering is a talking profession. you pitch your design, you defend your data, you command a team. But the reality is you can't solve a problem you don't understand. And you can't understand a problem if you're the one making all the noise. So for me, it's personal because I'm actually a very slow reader. I don't comprehend very well from the written word. I don't absorb hundreds of pages of documentation, even though I've made thousands of pages of documentation. It's totally the creative side is totally from listening to people in my industry. And so I've kind of had to turn it into a superpower because there's just so much experience that I have to from other people's brains and put in my own. And in aerospace, it really turns into this kind of tribal knowledge from graybeards, where we have these senior guys, who may have failed at this 50 years ago, and if you listen to them, they're like, no, 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 this is how you go, and you realize that there's a rhyme to development cycles. So we've been breaking the sound barrier for 70 years now. Like we're doing new things, but our new isn't that new. We're doing a different new. And so, for me, it was listening to these graybeards and kind of, internalizing all the things that they had learned so that I don't make new mistakes. I also have learned because listening to young engineers now that I have a team, they ask questions that experts would never ask, and they don't think things are impossible. So they bring this like very fresh perspective that can totally break a deadlock simply by being like, well, why don't you try this? And the rest of the room was like, "Well, that's close enough to something else that failed." But what they say is, just enough different that it totally works.
Moving into the story, because I always bring Addie into the conversation. And I think you're going to appreciate this little story that I'm bringing in. It's about hands on thinking. We call it the Get Your Hands Dirty Master Class because Aunt Loxley takes Addie and her friends to the hardware store so that they can start looking at things and asking why and like trying to figure out. And Addie asks a lot of why questions all throughout all of the books and life. But when did curiosity actually change your plan?
So, I mean, I've always been pretty curious. I've always been a tinkerer. I loved Legos and building and all those kinds of things. But it really didn't turn into something bigger until probably halfway through my career when I started doing nuclear work. So essentially, in context, nuclear is a world where guessing isn't an option. And so we started having to deal with this thing called acoustic loads. We're basically, as we're creating the steam to turn generators to power cities, this steam was getting so loud that it could break metal. And that was amazing to me. I didn't realize that you could actually make sound so loud to do that. And so as you're going through, when we measure stuff, we're like, okay, make this thicker or make this heavier, add more metal. And so for a while, I was just this professional punch maker. I was modifying designs, making them work. But then finally hit me that these acoustic waves were appearing in the data and everyone was focusing on surviving them, but no one had stopped to think why is the sound originating in the first place? And what is the physical reason and where is it coming from? To kind of look at it from developing the load side, basically just picturing the sound and modeling the sound and figuring this out. And so I ended up applying for them and developing something called the two microphone method that essentially uses microphones to say, hey, which sound is going this way and which sound is going that way. And then from that, we can take that and give it kind of a mathematical context and push back and kind of take a guess at where it's coming from in the actual reactor. And so that
Wow.
basically shifted my career, you know, from
Yeah.
a stress analyst, which is a valuable skill in both in the nuclear and in the aerospace world, into this existential detective that kind of just digs deeper.
Definitely. That's the best example of digging deep I've ever heard in my life. That is awesome. What is one small thing a kid could practice this week that would help them later?
Have to hear me out on this one. My one small habit is make your bed. I know it sounds cliche, and it's something a drill sergeant would say, but life, whether you're a student or an artist, it's an endurance sport, and we're kind of in here for the long haul. In order to survive this marathon, you have to live sustainably. When you're in a deep project, maybe studying for finals, or maybe in the middle of a launch campaign that's taking forever, chaos starts to creep in, and sometimes you just need that one little piece of control to do something for yourself. It's kind of this reset button. It's a signal to yourself that you respect your own rest in your own space. And I tell anyone, you can't build a high performance system if your foundation is falling apart. So making your bed is the first task of the day, and it's that one little small victory to kind of set things in motion. And after a long hard day, whether your experiment failed or the test didn't go right, you know, even if you just feel exhausted, at least you have this clean room and the made bed to come home to.
That is a great note to end on there, Josh. Thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you for pointing that out because I know a lot of mothers are going to appreciate hearing you say, make your bed. Thank you for watching Books That Build Skills. If today's story sparked an idea, gave you courage, or helped you see what's possible, then it did its job. Now remember, skills are not born and they are built. One choice, one challenge, one brave step at a time. So hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and keep exploring, building, reading, and dreaming big. I'm Loxley Brown, and this is Books That Build Skills. And you're just getting started.